So I've done it around the theme of the 12 HR days of Christmas, and really it's thinking about the high priority HR issues, employment law included, that we should have on our agenda to address now into 2026. A little bit of what we covered at the end of year, but trying to make it really pragmatic and actions focused in terms of what you need to do. So let us go with Santa here. Okay, so your instructions while you're watching this HR Bite session, it's called the 12 HR Days of Christmas. As I've said, 12 HR days. You will be given a checklist to accomplish in preparation for 2026. So take notes, make your list, check it twice before Fair Work finds out if you've been naughty or nice. Okay, so we're going to do a day of Christmas, starting from the first day of Christmas. Review your annualised salary arrangements. So we're all over. Everyone's heard about the Woolworths and Coles cases. I've presented on it previously. Christy talked about it at the end of year event. So you need to be all over it. Yes, the case is on appeal, but like Christy said, it could take 2 years to be on appeal. So, and look, and it might get upheld. Who's to know? So at this stage, that is a guiding factor for all of us. So I think it's really looking at what contracts you've got and what the wording is in those contracts, and looking at maybe some safeguards for yourself in terms of making sure you're meeting the requirements. At a minimum, you need to be running boot if you've got people on any salaried arrangements, and being really clear about factoring in, overtime, annual leave loading. And yes, we might say someone's paid 150 grand, so why should they get annual leave loading? But if they're award covered, they're entitled to annual leave loading, unless you've specifically got something in contract or somewhere else that says that that's not the case. Check your awards to see if you do have annualised salary provisions and take advantage of those. If not, we highly recommend definitely looking at individual flexibility agreements, because that, and Christy confirmed last week, is definitely a way that will help us in this situation with that case that's come through. Also, some of the other things which I thought were interesting people aren't aware of is the guarantee of annual earnings. So if people sit above the high income threshold, so we see that with engineers often with clients that are really high paid, they're still covered by the Professional Employees Award unless we put them on a guarantee of annual earnings. So you have to have the guarantee of annual earnings, which is normally written mostly as a separate document, and it does have to be redone every year. But what that means is by putting the guarantee of annual earnings in place, it does basically buy out of the award, and it does mean they're not eligible for unfair dismissal. So definitely something to consider. The extension of pay period obligations is about, if you're paying people weekly, maybe you look at a 4-weekly pay cycle. I think that's a big stretch and would be a huge change in most organisations, and I'm sure lots of opposition would be received. So our little gift over here, see Harrison's got these little green gifts that we're offering on some pages. Gifts, but gifts that you pay for, but gifts in terms that we can help you with. So the first gift is to help with your compliance. So we regularly do reviews of employment contracts, development of IFA templates, award and pay audits. Award and pay audit looks at what award they're covered by. And like we said before, just because you paid the above the award doesn't mean you're not award covered. Getting the classification level right, looking at the pay in terms of base pay, but all the other conditions, like we said, overtime, allowances, leave loading, whatever else there may be, based on rostering patterns, then running out the boot test to make sure you're meeting requirements. So if that's something then you need, please reach out. Oh, look, and on the second day, we are going to do our award pay audit. I've already covered off on that for you. So checking, so you should do is your checking award coverage, classification levels, and then the pay rates and entitlements under that. So you need to get to know your awards very, very well. And I'm going to say it for like the 100th time, is that just because you pay people above the award, even if it's double the award, they are still award covered. So you just need to be careful about your contract terms in that case. On the third day of Christmas, develop your AI rules. So as we also discussed, the use of AI is exceptionally high and growing in Australia and other places. But what we want as an organisation is for that to be done in a controlled way to protect our organisation, our customers and our people. So what that means for each organisation is developing your AI guidelines, usage policy, whatever you might want to call it. So the EU, probably nearly 2 years ago, at least 18 months ago, released their guidelines that are covering most organisations. It's excellent. You should look at it because what it does is do a risk assessment about the type of work or exposure that exists from that organisation, and based on that risk assessment, the type of controls that need to be put in place. So I definitely recommend that you have a look at that, and highly likely the EU's guidelines will in some way be adopted in Australia, or ours will be created off that. Australia does have some principles. There's 8 principles. So if you have a look at the Australian government, there's 8 principles. They're a bit light on at this stage, but definitely worth looking at. So very timely to start thinking about how that applies to your organisation. On the 4th day of Christmas, if you haven't already, you should definitely be doing your team festive season briefings. So that definitely looks like a policy, or at least reinforcing your policies around bullying, discrimination, sexual harassment, work health and safety, code of conduct, because as we know, social functions that are organised by the company are definitely a work function and we have exposure to. So really important to do that in the way of email communication, a presentation ideally to your team, but to reinforce that before the silly season, and being really clear as well is if something does happen, how we deal with that, who it gets reported to, how we're actioning that to make sure it's prioritised and addressed. So again, this is something that Harrison's can help you with. We have a silly season toolkit, which looks at the CEO communication, staff presentation, as well as policies. On the 5th day, cybersecurity is becoming an increasing issue for everyone, but definitely for organisations. So you need to train your employees in phishing, passwords, MFA and other scams because it is the season that cyber criminals love. So thinking about your policy, your usage and your training, because the number one reason for cybersecurity risks in organisations is human error of our employees. So we need to address that in the form of training and policy. On the 6th day, offer micro-credentialing. I love this. I love it. So I've got the site there, the National Micro-Cred Seeker. So we're all looking for development for our people. And this site, and I'm sure there's others, but it's the one that I know about, offers all of those single subject, university type subjects and others as single units that you can focus people's development on. So developing your L&D plan and then specifically looking at micro-credentialing and how we can use that, because I'm sure we've all got leaders, we'll use that as an example, that have moved into leader roles and they don't all want to go and do an MBA, but definitely some little micro-credential subjects that are focused on what they specifically need, targeted for them. Fabulous. On the 7th day, contractor checks. So the beginning of the year, we saw changes in legislation around contractors and gig workers. So most importantly is the deactivation process. So that's basically around how we dismiss gig workers and contractors. We need to be really careful of that because there is now exposure under Fair Work Act in terms of that deactivation process and us getting that wrong. We also need to look at how we're paying them, fair rates of pay, and considering all our sham contracting risks that have existed for quite a while under Fair Work. So again, Harrison's can help with reviewing that for you, advising on deactivation processes and also the terms and conditions that you have in place for them. On the 8th day of Christmas, identify your psychosocial hazards. So huge trend, growing trend of mental health injuries in the workplace. We've moved away from just the workplace bullying, which is the repeated behaviour, to one-off psychosocial incidents, or really that burnout in terms of the workplace culture, overwork, whatever that might be, is prevalent in workers' compensation claims that are happening. So definitely something that you need to be proactive on if you're not already. So that is about training your people on what that looks like, but also having, again, clear processes and systems, and at a minimum, conducting your own psychosocial hazards risk assessment for your workplace. So again, HR Harrison's can help with your mental health first aid training of your people, as well as that risk assessment. Leaders, poor leaders. I really feel for leaders. They're caught in the middle of, all of these pressures from employees, plus they've got to deliver from whatever executive is telling them to do. And they're in this position that often they've been promoted because they're a great technical person, but we're not giving them any of the skills to be able to really manage a team, or manage financials, or manage operations, or whatever else they need to do in their leader role. So I think, importantly, locking in some leadership development and coaching programs for 2026. We've mentioned micro-credentialing. There's definitely coaching available. There's leadership development programs. I think making them really pragmatic in terms of what is the skills that are specific to your people and your organisation that we need. But really, at a minimum, we need to be looking at those leadership skills around empathy, emotional intelligence, decision making, conflict resolution, delegation, empowerment, motivation, and accountability. So we have Donna on the line, who's become an expert in leadership development, but others are definitely available at Harrison's to provide leadership development programs customised to your organisation, plus individual leadership coaching if that's what you're looking for. On the 10th day, utilise your tech. So hopefully we all have a HRIS in place. If we don't, you should get one, or some sort of technology that automates the HR process, which we know can be administratively intensive. So at least we want to look at it for how we onboard, because that helps with compliance as well, if we can streamline that through tech, and also the recruitment process, which, historically are now a labour intensive, paper intensive, administratively intensive processes for HR, but also for line managers as well. So I would be looking at all of your HRIS workflows, the permissions, giving permissions to your leaders to let them do part of the process. HR doesn't need to control and do the whole process. What your contracts, they're all hopefully going out via your HRISs in a streamlined way and coming back in that way. It still amazes me to hear so many of our clients emailing out employment contracts, and then people have to print them, sign them, scan them, send them back. We shouldn't be doing that. Like, at a minimum, get something like DocuSign or Dropbox Sign to get rid of that process, automate it. And obviously AI fits very nicely into this category as well. But thinking about what you can do to maximise the benefit of the technology that you do have. Harrison's loves to help with HRIS, whether it's a cleanup, which we've done a number of recently, or helping you select and implement a HR information system. Of course, we have to polish our policies. They're forever changing in terms of legislation. So the big ones, obviously, leave, flexibility. I'm not talking here about hybrid and remote work, but we know it's an ongoing trend, prevalence, but there's risk that goes with that on many fronts, plus the being able to manage performance of people in that type of environment. So getting the policy right, misconduct, performance, obviously safety, cybersecurity, remote work, your code of conduct, making sure it's linked to your values and behaviours. AI, we talked about. Privacy, I'm not touching on today either, but a big issue for organisations in terms of privacy and the requirements, and contractor and gig worker management. So having a little refresh of that. Harrison's regularly looks at policies for our clients, so we do have a policy pack that will cover those things. Okay, and on the final 12th day of Christmas, plan for success. So set up your schedule, your plan, your habits in order for compliance and your HR plan to be delivered in 2026. That's your roadmap. It means you come back in 2026 calm, predictable, and having a low risk year that you're ready for. So again, I'd love to do a HR planning session with you. So please reach out to book that in. If you'd like help, these are our contact details. But I thank you very much today for joining our 12 HR Days of Christmas. I'm Claire Harrison. Thanks for listening.